Hello, and welcome back to Gods, Myths and Legends. We've got something quite eerie for you today. We're opening the doors to the mystique of Irish folklore and setting our sights on a haunting figure, the Banshee. We're going to talk about who she is, why she wails, and the chill her story has sent down spines over centuries. Make sure to stay with us until the end as we tell a story about the Banshee and the Irish village of Kilfenora. Now, let's get into the world of the Banshee. The Banshee, called the Bean Sidhe in Irish Gaelic, is a famous figure from ancient Irish Celtic beliefs. The word Banshee means woman of the fairy mound, or fairy woman, and it connects her to other magical beings in Irish stories. People thought banshees were the spirits of their family members, who became magical beings after they died. People started believing in banshees a long time ago, and you can find mentions of them in old Irish writings like the Catherine Thuard from the 14th century. Banshees are said to cry or wail when a family member is close to death, and the people who are going to die can hear their sad songs. This idea connects the Banshee to old Irish customs, where women were chosen to cry and mourn at funerals and when important people were dying. These women were called keeners, and sometimes their loud cries were called banshee wails, showing how banshees are connected to Irish traditions about death. One important thing to know about banshees is that they are connected to specific Irish families or clans. Some noble families in different parts of Ireland were often linked to banshees. These families often had O or Mac in their names. For example, O'Briens, O'Neills, O'Grady's and McNamara's were some of these families. Also, the banshee's story continued even after Christianity became popular in Ireland. People started thinking of her more as a superstition and a part of old stories rather than something against Christian beliefs. That's why the idea of the Banshee still exists in Irish stories today. People still find her interesting in Irish culture, and both scholars and regular readers like to learn about her. Now let's talk about how people have shown the Banshee in pictures and stories. It's important to know that different cultures and societies have shown banshees in different ways over time. People often think of the Banshee as an old scary woman, but actually, her appearance in Irish stories can be quite different. How she looks depends on the story, who's telling it, or who's listening. But no matter what she looks like, one thing stays the same. She has a spooky cry and comes from the world of the supernatural. A long time ago, the earliest stories described the Banshee as a beautiful woman dressed in white with long, flowing hair, often red. This red hair symbolized her connection to the magical world. People found her beauty so enchanting that anyone who saw her would be mesmerized by her. In later stories, especially during the Middle Ages, the Banshee started to be portrayed as an ugly old woman. This might represent people's fear of death. They imagined her as a skinny, wrinkled lady in ragged clothes, crying and wailing in the night. Her eyes were often pictured as fiery red from crying for centuries. In some stories, the Banshee even turned into different animals, linked to witchcraft like weasels, stoats, hares, or even the spooky crow. These different looks for the Banshee have symbolic meanings. They often show what people were worried about in their culture, or how they thought about life, death, and beauty. But no matter how she looks, one thing is clear. She warns people about death with her eerie cries. Even though the Banshee might sound really scary, she's not trying to harm anyone. She's more of a tragic figure, and her mournful cries show her sadness. In Irish folklore, the Banshee is not thought of as a harmful creature, but as a sign that someone is going to pass away. Her sad crying is often connected with darkness and death, but it's important to know that she doesn't cause death. Instead, she is seen as a kind spirit who is sad about the upcoming death and mourns for those who are going to die. One common idea about the Banshee is that she is connected to specific Irish families. Stories say that each Banshee is linked to a noble family and acts as a guardian spirit, grieving when someone from that family is going to die. This goes back to ancient times when each Banshee was either an ancestor or had special ties to the family. In some stories, it's said that the Banshee appears to the person who is going to die. Sometimes families hear her crying before the person actually passes away. These stories make the Banshee a reminder of how death is a part of life, like a symbol saying, "Remember, you will die." On the other hand, some Irish tales show the Banshee as a beautiful and loving figure who faced a sad fate. When a man hears her cry, he falls deeply in love with her. This gives the Banshee a romantic side, showing her as a tragic but loving character. So the Banshee has different roles in Irish stories, as a reminder of death, a protector spirit, and in some stories a romantic figure. These different ideas show how Irish people think about death and the afterlife, making the Banshee an important symbol in their culture. In other stories, the Banshee is portrayed as someone who brings death. In these tales, her crying doesn't warn about death, it actually causes it. This view connects her to other mythical creatures known for causing death, like the Grim Reaper in Western stories. In some stories, the Banshee is all about showing empathy. Here, she cries and mourns for the people who have passed away because she is deeply sad. She becomes a symbol of the shared pain and sadness that death brings, and her cries let the community express their grief together. There's also a less common idea of the Banshee as a tragic lover. In these stories, she is a beautiful woman cursed with a sad fate, and her mournful cry is like a song of her own heartbreak. This way of seeing the Banshee shows a different, more romantic side to her character. Even though these ideas about the Banshee are different, they all show different parts of her role in Irish stories. In all her forms, the Banshee reminds us about the idea of death and how life is fragile, and we will all face death someday. The Banshee, as we talked about before, is linked mostly to Irish stories, but she also has connections to broader Celtic mythology that includes places like Wales, Scotland, Isle of Man, Brittany, and Cornwall, not just Ireland. Celtic beliefs had many stories and myths, and the Banshee is part of a group of supernatural beings called the Aos Si, or Aes Sid. These Sid, or fairy beings, are often seen as ancient gods or nature spirits who lost their power when humans took over the earth, pushing these older inhabitants into the other world. While the Sidhi are often linked to nature and natural events, the Banshee has a darker role, mostly related to death, especially as a sign of death. This theme is also seen in other death bringers or death announcers in Celtic mythology, like the Welsh Gwrach Rhibyn, a hag associated with death. However, the Gwrach Rhibyn is usually seen as less kind than the Banshee and is connected to scary and evil actions. This recurring theme of a ghostly woman telling about or mourning death might seem strange at first, but it's a consistent part of Celtic mythology, showing how people in these cultures think about death and the afterlife. Looking at similar figures in other cultures, many have traits in common with the Banshee. In Scottish stories, there's the Bean Nighe, similar to the Banshee, known as a death omen. In Norse mythology, we have the Valkyries, who also predict death, but have a different role. In Slavic folklore, the Rusalka are similar in some ways, but also different. In Hispanic folklore, there's La Llorona, and in Japanese stories, we find the Ubume and Yurei, all with their own unique features. These figures share some similarities with the Irish Banshee, but they also have their own special traits. They represent their culture's beliefs about death and supernatural beings and show how people everywhere try to understand the mysteries of death. Her eerie image has had a lasting impact on various cultures and aspects of life. In Ireland, the Banshee's tales have influenced local customs and traditions. For instance, the practice of keening, a way of singing sorrowful songs for the deceased, is often linked to the Banshee's cries. Keening was a significant part of Irish funeral customs until the mid-20th century. Beyond Ireland, the Banshee has also affected other cultures. In American folk traditions, especially in areas with many Irish Americans, stories of the Banshee have become part of local folklore and superstitions. The Banshee's cultural impact can also be seen in literature and entertainment. She has inspired poets, writers, and storytellers for centuries. In addition to literature, the Banshee has become a popular figure in horror stories. She often appears in movies, TV shows, and video games as a sign of death or a frightening supernatural being. Furthermore, the Banshee has made her mark in music. There was even a rock band called Banshee in the 1980s, named after this mythical figure. And many songs and albums have been inspired by the Banshee's melancholic image. Now that you understand the story behind the Banshee, we have arrived at the final part of this video, and as promised, it's time to tell a tale about the Banshee. The village Kilfenora. In the heart of County Clare, surrounded by nothing but sprawling pastures and the distant rugged cliffs, there lay a small Irish village, Kilfenora. As the autumn weather began to turn, casting a chill over the rolling green landscape, the village was quiet, save for a peculiar sound that filled the night air. One night, an ungodly wailing sound swept across the cottages nestled under the crescent moon. The noise was like nothing the villagers had heard before, a mournful cry that seemed to be carried along on the cold winds, echoing around the village square and snaking down the narrow alleyways. It was a soul-penetrating keen that curdled the blood of those who heard it. a sound that shook awake even the deepest sleepers. This awful noise, as mournful as a widow's cry, persisted every evening for a whole week. Unseen, its source remained a mystery. Children cowered under their blankets, their eyes wide with unspoken fear. Even grown men hurried home after dark, casting anxious glances at the shadowy corners of the village, the unnatural chorus following them home. A sense of dread had befallen the inhabitants of Kilfenora, and whispers started to echo amongst the villagers. Whispers of an old Irish legend, the dreadful wailing of a banshee. After all, wasn't it said that if a banshee's wailing was heard, then death was imminent for someone connected with the house it haunts? But whose death was it signaling? It wasn't long before their question found an answer. One cloudy morning, as the dawn broke over the quaint cottages, the essential pillar of their community was found lifeless. Michael O'Sullivan, a well-respected blacksmith of the town and a cherished friend to all, had unexpectedly passed away in his sleep. Only after Michael O'Sullivan's funeral did the ghostly wailing finally cease. The town fell into silence once more, save for the benign whispering of the wind through the cobblestones and the comforting sounds of the rural countryside. But the aftermath of the banshee's visit lingered. The villagers slowly came to terms with their loss, beaten down by the shock of Michael's sudden death, but resilient in their shared mourning. They told and retold the tale, each passing day adding a new layer to the story, a new nuance to the banshee's cries, a new hint of the eerie chill that had swept through their lives. The villagers they used to be and the villagers they were now had been demarcated sharply by the phantom haunting. Simultaneously, the myth of Michael and the Banshee became an indelible part of Kilfenora's narrative. The legend was passed down through generations, weaving its way into the folklore of the village, a bittersweet reminder of their spirit, their community and their shared history. In time, laughter and chatter once again filled the air around Kilfenora, but the story remained, tucked into the corners of hushed whispers and quiet nights. And even now, when the winds of fall sweep through the village and a mournful cry wafts through the air, the old and young alike look at each other, their hearts heavy with the memory of the time a banshee had visited them. Thanks so much for tuning in and journeying with us into the spine-tingling world of the Banshee. We appreciate you spending your time with us, and we hope you enjoyed your stay. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already done so. Stay curious, stay brave, and remember, every myth has a bit of truth in it. We'll see you in our next video. Until then, take care and goodbye.